As Donald Trump's presidency collapses, as he hits record low approvals and all-time presidential history, is Donald Trump right now shredding documents? Is Donald Trump right now spoliating, destroying records? Is Donald Trump deleting emails, deleting text messages? Is the entire Trump regime right now involved in a cover-up of the criminality that they engaged in my opinion, for the past 13, 14 months since the Trump regime came into power? All of the ways they would communicate on the encrypted apps, which they weren't supposed to do, all of the direct messages that may be sent on Truth Social or other social media platforms, all of these communications that were done, in the context of the business of the White House, of the business of the executive branch. Guess who they don't belong to? Donald Trump and his staff and his cabinet. Guess who they belong to? Us. We the people. And just because the Trump regime may use certain types of phones or certain types of emails or certain types of whatever, the bottom line is that can't be subterfuge for ways to not preserve communications records relating to the presidency. There's something called the Presidential Records Act, right, which became law in 1978. It was a post-Nixon, very important law that no one ever challenged in the executive branch because you do things by the book. You don't challenge the constitutionality of this. And it basically says you got to preserve your presidential communications. Now, it's one of the things that Donald Trump ran afoul of and violated and led to the criminal investigations into him following his first term, where he did not follow the steps of the Presidential Records Act that requires preservation of records. There's a whole process for it. I don't care what political side you're on or if you don't like politics at all. Don't we want to have records of what's going on with our tax dollars, from the executive branch? I mean, isn't that something that we want insight into and that we want to know about? So what Donald Trump did was he had his DOJ and their Office of Legal Counsel do a memo. And, the very fact that they even had to ask this question in the first place is absurd. And the question that they asked is the Presidential Records Act of 1978 constitutional? And here, Trump's legal department, their Office of Legal Counsel within the DOJ, basically says, you've asked us whether the Presidential Records Act of 1978 is constitutional. We conclude it's not. Then it goes on to talk about the Presidential Records Act is unconstitutional for two independent but interlocking reasons. It exceeds Congress's enumerated and implied powers, and it aggrandizes the legislative branch at the expense of the constitutional independence and autonomy of the executive branch. And they go, every law enacted by Congress must be based on one or more of its powers enumerated in the Constitution or such implied powers as are necessary and proper to carry into effect the enumerated powers. Congress's attempt to regulate the presidency directly raise heightened separation of powers concerns. And they cite another legal memo or law review article to try to say that the Presidential Records Act is somehow unconstitutional. I want to bring in Harry Litman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Talking Feds Substack, and Talking Feds podcast. Harry, this is one of those stories that's not getting nearly enough attention because, when you declare the Presidential Records Act to be unconstitutional, they've decreed it. And I want you to break down when you talk about it. A judge isn't saying this. The Supreme Court isn't saying it. They're saying it, but they are now going by a legal interpretation that they've just pronounced, they've divined. And they're saying the subtext, right, is we're destroying records. We're shredding records. We're not saving anything at all. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And Harry, I guess first address the significance of what they're doing because it's massive. And then secondly, talk to us. The hard part then is the what are you going to do? Because this has never happened before where a president said, I'm not going to follow this. So then the question becomes, stuff that you and I talk about. Who has standing to sue? Who can bring this lawsuit? And they'll try, to block them from doing this. Is it general standing that anybody can do? Does it have to be Congress that brings the lawsuit? And so they raise these novel legal questions that shouldn't be novel because no one since 1978 this was passed ever even thought that this was something that could be challenged like this. And so Harry, what do you make of it all? What happened?
Yeah. So this idea, as you said, though, it's violating our independence and autonomy. What does that mean? Our independence and autonomy to destroy papers, right? So there's insertion of independence and autonomy to do whatever we want with papers that, in any way of looking at it, as you say, Ben, they are the stewards of the White House, not the owners of it. The ability, and by the way, presidential records date back. Under this interpretation, they could just ransack whatever they wanted. The FBI surveillance of Martin Luther King. It doesn't. They can just go and do it. Look, this is a dry topic, it sounds like, but it is super important. It passed, as you say, in 78. That's in the wake of Watergate, and it was going to be maybe the first count of obstruction for the count of impeachment against Richard Nixon. He was destroying records. It's the 18.5-minute gap. I know. I mean, if this had prevailed then, he wouldn't have been impeached. He'd have just shredded everything. And that's, of course, always the temptation and interest of a president. And that's why to cover things up. And that's why you need something like this. And it really has, this is something that's taken so seriously, or has been, within the Department of Justice. You get all kinds of training, and you have to certify all things. It is the notion, as you put it, that these records belong to the people is a really sacrosanct point, or until 2 days ago. And now enter the 40-year-old or so Office of Legal Counsel, Assistant Attorney General, same guy who green-lighted the bombing of the Venezuelans, or the two people clinging to the ship, or the Iran war itself. This is someone who is, within the confines of his job, ready to be accommodating. And the basic argument here is, as you put it, something to do with that Congress doesn't have enumerated powers, but I don't want to bore the Midas mighty or even the Fed heads with this, but the necessary and proper clause is pretty capacious. Let me just say that. So it really rests on this. Who are you, Congress, to tell us what to do and what we can keep and what we can't keep? But man, oh man, is this dangerous, because the Office of Legal Counsel, these opinions have force of law within the executive branch. Remember Bob Mueller? He stayed his hand so much in talking about Trump, even though he developed evidence of criminal conduct. Why was that? Because there wasn't a Supreme Court immunity opinion then. There was an OLC opinion saying we won't indict a sitting president. And that was just taken to be the law. It wasn't tested. That was just what applied within the executive branch. And so Mueller, fair man that he was, said, if I can't charge him and give him a chance to prove his innocence, then it's not fair of me to sort of dirty him up. But that's a very vivid illustration of the notion that OLC opinions have the force of law. So now this Assistant Attorney General for OLC has said this. It's the law within the executive branch. And I think, you're exactly right. They could set up shredders tomorrow and just start feeding him just as a kind of, corrupt government does before they are chased out of town. And you really put your finger on it, unsurprisingly, sophisticated lawyer as you are. How exactly is this challenged? Who's gonna have the standing under the court's doctrines to say you can't destroy that piece of paper? It's almost by definition, as you well explained, these records belong to the American people, but it's pretty canonical that you just have an objection because you're one of the American people. That's not going to fly. And you really wonder, look, it's America. There'll be a lawsuit and there'll be ingenious efforts at standing. But I literally don't see right now if Trump say, in between shooting people in the eyes on Fifth Avenue, just feeds everything into the shredder, the Jack Smith report and the like, who sues to stop it? Someone, I expect, does, and there are certain special kinds of standing doctrines where you are challenging or defending against separation of powers concerns, but certain courts are very starchy about it. It's a murky topic, and you combine that with the importance of it and the principle that OLC, when they issue things, it's like the Supreme Court. They speak for the executive branch. I think as of today, they could go on a shred fest, and they have every reason to. And you gotta hope that a court can intervene, or Congress this is, again, Congress has made this clear. It's obviously a job for them. They should be saying, you do this, we're giving you no money for nothing. I mean, that's a real kind of constitutional showdown. But Congress is meek and is allergic to constitutional showdowns. So how precisely we take a principle that anyone, if they were pushed to it, would have to endorse. Presidential records should be preserved and they belong to the people. How that is going to prevail as a matter of the rule of law, Ben, I think is pretty cloudy as of now when you have this new opinion authoritative status within the executive branch.
Harry Litman runs the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Talking Feds podcast, and Talking Feds Substack. We'll be looking to see same issues that we also talked about, though. One of the big issues with the ballroom lawsuit, who can sue? We all are impacted. And there was a party, though, the National Trust for the Preservation. Right. We ended up finding, not you and I, but someone was the right party with the right standing. So the question is here, that's going to have to be, again, novel legal issues that we hate were novel. Is there a group that can really claim standing in this type of situation? Who's that going to be? Especially when the executive branch and the DOJ are the ones who are creating this legal opinion that someone adjacent to the executive branch would probably be somebody bringing it, whether it was some sort of oversight entity but I don't know. Well, we will see.
You're absolutely right, and we'll be there when it happens, Ben, and to evaluate it. But I just want to be clear. What are they saying? They are saying we have the absolute constitutional prerogative to shred and destroy, do whatever we want with presidential records. It's part and parcel of their Orwellian project of rewriting history. And that's a breathtaking assertion of power. And I got to say, an anti-democratic one. We're entitled as the American people to know what the hell happened, absent only national security concerns, those kinds of things. But that they can withhold documents, but that doesn't mean you can destroy them. And just imagine the sorts of things they could ransack. It is a chilling prospect.
Harry Litman runs the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Substack, and podcast. Subscribe to all of Harry Litman's channels, especially Talking Feds YouTube. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Ben.
And everybody hit subscribe here as well.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to add the Meidastouch podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts for new updates every single day.